It's time for Tales TV!
We just popped in to say hello. We just popped in to hear the show, the show, the show. You'll hear the show and then you'll go. There's more to know, so take it slow. The show, the show, the show.
The shed says, "You are welcome."
A place full of tales.
Made by your imagination.
There's things to be told.
Things to be sung.
Some that are old.
And things that are young.
From the tips of our toes
To the top of your head. Together we are
Tales from the shed. Together we are
Tales from the Shed.
Tales from the Shed.
Tales from the Shed.
Welcome everyone to Tales TV. Something from the past and something from the future. Because you, my little friends, are the future. But let's go back to Tales from the Shed's very first video that was filmed at the Chickenshed Theatre. It's a long, long time ago. Before you were born. Before your parents were born. Before your grandparents were born. Before your Get on with it. Sorry. This is how we start the show. This is Good Morning, Morning, Morning. Ducka, 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 duck. Boom.
Good morning, morning, morning. Jump up and say hello. Good afternoon, I'll be back soon. I've got to go. Good night, good night, good night. Sleep tight the whole night through. Good morning, afternoon, and night to you and me and you and me and you.
It's the morning. Get the whole world out of bed.
It's the morning, rub the sleep out of your head.
It's the morning, say goodnight to stars instead. Say good morning to the morning, get the whole world out of bed.
Good morning, morning, morning. Jump up and say hello. Good afternoon, I'll be back soon. I've got to go.
Good night, good night, good night. Sleep tight the whole night through. Good morning, afternoon, and night to you and me and you and me and you and me and you.
A honey bear has a sweet tooth. A panda climbs and swings. A sloth bear eats fruit all day. And a grizzly bear roars and sings. A sun bear grazes in the sun. A polar bear jumps in the snow. A spectacled bear is hard to find. And a teddy bear you can cuddle on the go. But the bears that live in the shed are really unique to see. One sings, one acts, and the other's a dancer. Here they are, the bears. 1, 2, 3.
One, two, three, bears! Funky bears are in your town. 1, 2, 3, bears! Gonna blow your house right down. 1, 2, 3, bears! Act and sing and dance all day. 1, 2, 3, bells! Join us, then we'll have our play. 1, 2, 3, bells! Funky bears are in your town. 1, 2, 3, bells! Gonna blow your house right down. 1, 2, 3, bells! Act and sing and dance all day. You and me, together we will have a play.
I say the question is, to be or not to be? I dream of playing Hamlet, but end up as a tree.
I was born in France, but I live indoors, and I'm giving it my all. I come alive when I hear the jive, and I bow to the curtain call.
I love to ooh, I love to ah. I sing the notes, bar after bar. When we're together,
1, 2, 3. Acting, sing and dance all day. You and me, together we will have a play.
Hello, my name is Anna. Anna. I am from Spain. I'm living near Madrid. I have worked with Pete and the Tails team for 7 years. And here is a video on how to make a blur at home. Bye!
How to make your very own puppet at home. All you need is a sheet of paper, pencil, colouring pencils, scissors, a black marker, glue stick and a small plate to draw a circle.
We can't wait for you to make your puppets at home. In fact, we'd love to see them. You can email a picture of your puppet to us at tales@chickenshed.org.uk, or you can tag us on all our social medias at Tales TV. We'll put a link in the description box below. And if you do, we'll feature your puppet in the next episode. And now a brief important message from our very own Blurgh.
Hello everybody. I'm just on the phone, phoning a cab to go to the seaside.
Stay at home, Blurgh.
Oh yeah, better hang up.
Be right back, everyone. Just going out for a few hours. I'll be back when I want. Bye.
Blurgh, stop. You need to stay at home.
Blurgh, what's he doing?
Nothing, Karina. Definitely not trying to escape.
You need to stay at home.
Sorry, Karina. I'll go back inside. Hey, everyone. It's not Blurgh here. It's this guy, Blurgh. And I'm just going out to the park for a few hours with my friends. See you soon.
Blurgh, stop. I can see it's you.
It's not Blurgh.
It is Blurgh.
It's not Blurgh. It's this guy, Blurgh.
No, it's Blurgh in a disguise.
Alright, it is Blurgh. I'm sorry, Karina. What should I do again?
You need to stay home and we're going to save lives.
Okay, Karina. I can see it's important. Stay home, everyone, and stay safe. Blah, 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 blah.
Stay at home, Blurgh.
I learnt my lesson well. Got to stay at home and support the NHS. It's a lovely day outside, but we gotta stay inside. Stay safe, everyone.
It's time for us to go now. We had fun, but we're done, so we'll go now. You were great, but it's late, so we'll go now. Go now, go now.
Hold on, everybody. This is a bit of a downbeat ending. We can't end like this. The children deserve better. Come on, pick it up. Let's go.
We gotta go, 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 go. We gotta go, but we're coming back. We gotta go, 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 go. We gotta go, but we're coming back. We gotta go, 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 go. We gotta go, but we're coming back. We gotta go, 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 go. We gotta go, but we're coming back.
Hell Day is closing. We hope you've had some fun.
We will sincerely miss you, each and every one.
So long, everybody. We say it with a sigh.
See you
later, everybody. For now, it's Tails goodbye.
See you later, everybody.
For now,
It's Tails goodbye. Blah, 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 blah.
What do you think, eh? Our very first Blurgh-episode. Looking forward to you coming back. So why don't you follow us, subscribe to us on all those things that people do on social media. Hope to see you soon. There's lots of links down there and over there. Links everywhere. And the most important link is you. What do you think? That's okay. Okay. I was brilliant.